you concerned about escalation, and are you concerned that Erdogan will try to wipe out the Kurds?
I will wipe out his economy if that happens. I've already done it once with Pastor Brunson. I'm sure that I hope that he will act rationally.
Just days after U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew troops from northern Syria, Turkey has launched an incursion into the region. As shells and airstrikes lit up the night sky, Turkish ground troops marched across the border. It's an attack that's been expected for days ever since Trump ordered American troops out of the area. Those forces were effectively protecting the Kurds after the Kurds had helped the U.S. fight ISIS. Several countries have condemned the Turkish action, including the UK, France, and Canada. Just moments ago, Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland tweeted, "This unilateral action risks undermining the stability of an already fragile region, exacerbating the humanitarian situation, and rolling back progress achieved by the global coalition against Daesh, of which Turkey is a member. We call for the protection of civilians and on all parties to respect their obligations under international law, including unhindered access for humanitarian aid." So what might Turkey's endgame be here? And why did Trump order the withdrawal of American troops? This afternoon, I spoke to Graham Wood, staff writer at The Atlantic and a lecturer in political science at Yale University. He was in New York. Hi, Mr. Wood. Nice to see you. Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.
So I want to drill down a little bit into what President Trump is saying. He's addressing the decision, obviously, that he made and some of the ramifications of it. He issued a statement. Notably, it didn't mention the Kurds once. The statement acknowledges Turkey's military operation and says, quote, "The U.S. does not endorse this attack and has made it clear to Turkey that this operation is a bad idea." How do you interpret that given the actions of his administration prior to this?
Well, we've seen a lot of back and forth in the decisions of Trump. You know, at the end of the weekend, late at night, he said American troops are going to get out of the way and let Turkey do what it needs to do. And then just 12 or so hours later, he said that he would obliterate the economy of Turkey if Turkey did what everybody expected Turkey to do with that kind of a blank check. So it's not really clear what we should understand the position of the Trump administration to be on this, because it does seem like no one is standing in the way of Turkey, an ally of the United States, a NATO member, from destroying another ally of the United States, which is the Kurdish people who have been fighting against ISIS in northern Syria.
The Turkey's President Erdogan says that the offensive is aimed at, quote, preventing the creation of a terror corridor across our southern border. What is the reality from your perspective on what's happening with Turkey and Syria right now?
We see really different interpretations of what terror means between what the West, what the United States or Canada sees as terror, and what Turkey sees as terror. When we think of terror, we think probably mostly of ISIS. And we remember a very real terror corridor that was going from Turkey into Syria. But Turkey thinks of the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which indeed had an insurgency against Turkey since the mid-1980s. So they think that by stopping a Kurdish state from developing in northern Syria, which it was well on its way to doing, they'll be able to stop the more important of these two terror threats. But that state developed in part because we, the collective global coalition against ISIS, needed someone who was going to fight against ISIS. And the Kurds who were there were the ones who were volunteering on the front line to do that.
How do you think it's going to play out in that region? I mean, we know the offensive has started.
Yes, and the offensive having started has already terrified the Kurdish population in cities like Qamishli and other areas around the Turkish border. It's not clear what Donald Trump can do other than call Erdogan and say, do what we're letting you do, but do it softly. Do it in a way that doesn't amount to ethnic cleansing. The truth of the matter is that there are two allies of the United States, Turkey and the Kurds, who were never going to be able to have modus vivendi. And so at some point this was going to happen, and now it's happening, and it seems like Trump has no ability to modulate how it's actually going to look. It could be very, very bad.
Does any country, or is there a role for any country to try and modulate what that looks like, or is that only available to the U.S.?
It used to be the ability of the U.S. to say, look, these are our allies, that we don't agree with them ideologically, but the Kurds of northern Syria have died in our place in the fight against ISIS, and so we're not going to let you just steamroll into their territory. But with the urgency that this administration feels to leave Syria, to get out of the Middle East altogether, Trump has effectively said, we're not going to be there to ask anything of you. We can just give you telephone calls from Washington, but none of our troops are there to guarantee the safety of our Kurdish allies. So it looks to me right now like the Republic of Turkey has a really free hand to do what it likes along its border, and that includes steamrolling and destroying, obliterating a key ally in the fight against ISIS.
What about international pressure coming from other places? We know that France, for example, has not so much condemned it, but spoken out against what's happening. The UK has said that they have serious concerns. Should there be a more concerted international effort, and if so, what form might that take?
Yes, there have been pressures from France, which has long been sympathetic, I think, with the Kurds, and others. There are also some rumblings, even among Trump's allies in the United States Congress, who say that they will do what it takes to suspend Turkey from NATO, to have sanctions against Turkey, and maybe that will have some effect. But you have to understand how urgent this seems to Turkey. Turkey has been fighting against this Kurdish group for a very long time, and it is at the very top of Turkey's priorities to make sure that that group never has enough power to turn into a state and to wage the kind of campaign against Turkey that it did in the 1980s and 1990s.
So there's so time is of the essence, really.
I think that there's the imminent problem of Turkey rolling in and invading northern Syria. In the long term, there are not really any great solutions right here, but the danger for the United States in particular is being seen accurately to have betrayed one of its key allies.
And in that, just jumping off of that, what are the wider implications of that? Do you think that sends a wider signal outside of that region?
It definitely does. I mean, the United States, having its disastrous Iraq invasion, doesn't want to go in with lots of troops, but there are consequences to not going in with lots of troops. It means you have to get allies to do it for you, and some of those allies won't be people who you like or who your allies like. That's exactly what happened here, and it limited the number of options that the United States had. More broadly, any group that hears that the United States wants it to die on Americans' behalf is going to really wonder. It didn't work out that well for the Kurds, and so the example will be remembered.
What about specific to that region? Obviously not, an unstable part of the world already. What kind of implications do you think this decision and what might ensue right now with this offensive might have on the region?
So the major players in the region, of course, are the government of Syria and Damascus, Turkey, Russia, the United States. And these Kurds, who in the past have allied themselves with Damascus, they don't ally themselves with Damascus right now, but they were sheltered by Damascus when they were fighting against Erdogan against Turkey in the 1990s. So it wouldn't be too surprising if the Kurds decide their priorities shouldn't be keeping ISIS fighters in prison and secure, but instead keeping themselves secure. And that would mean reprioritizing their assets so that they are more aligned with Assad, perhaps also with Russia, and less aligned with the United States.
And does that mean the potential for the reemergence? I know it's not completely gone, but obviously the reemergence on a bigger scale of ISIS exists to a larger degree now?
ISIS is definitely one of the beneficiaries of this realignment. ISIS, remember, there is a huge refugee camp called Al-Hawl that has many ISIS fighters in it. There are detention centers that are run by Kurds that have ISIS within them. And these places, there is no resolution. One thing that Trump has right is that the foreign fighters who are in these camps, who are in these jails, have not been taken responsibility for by their home countries. And the Kurds if they don't feel like the United States is behind them, won't want to keep on taking responsibility for them either. So ISIS could regroup. It could take advantage of that chaos and disarray.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Mr. Wood. Really appreciate your insights this evening.
Thanks so much.
That's Graham Wood of The Atlantic. U.S. President Donald Trump was asked about the detained ISIS fighters in Syria late this afternoon. Take a listen.
These ISIS fighters escape and pose a threat elsewhere.
Well, they're going to be escaping to Europe. That's where they want to go. They want to go back to their homes, but Europe didn't want them from us. We could have given it to them. They could have had trials. They could have done whatever they wanted. But as usual, it's not reciprocal. You know my favorite word, reciprocal. That's all I want. I don't want an edge. I just want reciprocal. And it's not reciprocal, Steve. It's not a fair deal for the United States.
And on that point, there is some breaking news across the wires right now. According to Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces in northeast Syria on Twitter, one of the Turkish airstrikes have hit one of the prisons in which ISIS detainees are held. Exactly what was just referenced there in the end of our interview with Mr. Wood and by Mr. Trump. The fear is, of course, that a number of those prisoners who were fighters with ISIS will be able to regroup and reemerge as a terrorist force in that area and perhaps in other areas. According to the Kurdish-led forces in northeast Syria, those airstrikes from Turkey that were launched overnight have hit one of the prisons in which ISIS detainees are held. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.